The gravel shifted beneath her tires the moment she pulled in, and somewhere behind the fence, a camera blinked red, a gate motor hummed to life, and a woman who had been warned 3 times smiled slowly because this time she was ready. The neighborhood of Crestwood Hollow had exactly the kind of quiet that deceived people. It looked like the sort of place where nothing ever happened. Manicured hedges, lantern-style streetlights, driveways sealed with expensive pavers, or, in one particular case, a long stretch of hand-laid Tennessee limestone gravel that curved from the iron gate at Fenwick Road all the way up to the detached garage behind the stone colonial at number 14. The gravel was not incidental. It had been installed with purpose, maintained with care, and posted with 2 laminated signs, one at the gate, one near the mailbox, that read, in plain black letters on a white background, "Private driveway. No parking. Vehicle will be immobilized." Most people read those signs and kept driving. Diane Calloway did not read signs. Or rather, she read them and decided they applied to other people. Margot Veldthorpe had lived at number 14 for 11 years. She was 53, recently widowed, and ran a small but serious landscaping consultancy from her home office in the East Wing. She had bought the property with her late husband, Gerald, who had passed 2 winters ago from a sudden cardiac event that left her with a mortgage she could manage, a grief she was still learning to carry, and a deep, practiced conviction that the world functioned better when people respected what belonged to others. Gerald had laid that gravel himself. 2 weekends, a rented machine, and 4 tons of stone, swearing the whole time about the August heat, but proud of it in the way men get proud of physical things they build with their own hands. After he died, Margot could not bring herself to pave over it. She had it re-edged and topped instead, and she kept it immaculate. The driveway had become, in some way she didn't like to examine too closely, the last thing he'd built. She protected it accordingly. The trouble with Diane Calloway had started 8 months ago, in the autumn, when the new pediatric dental clinic 3 blocks over on Harmon Street began undergoing renovation and lost its small parking lot to construction staging. Several of the clinic's staff had taken to parking on the residential streets nearby, which was legal and fine, and something Margot had no objection to whatsoever. What she objected to was Diane Calloway, who was a front desk coordinator at the clinic and who drove a glacier-white BMW 5 Series she treated with the reverence one usually reserved for sacred objects, parking that BMW on Margot's gravel driveway. The first time, Margot had assumed it was an accident, a misread of the property line, perhaps. She had left a polite note under the windshield wiper, handwritten on cream notepaper with her phone number at the bottom. Diane had not called. She had, apparently, read the note, because the next day she'd parked on the street like everyone else. Margot thought that was the end of it. The second time happened 6 weeks later, on a Tuesday in early November, a day of sharp wind and low gray clouds. Margot had looked out her kitchen window while making coffee and seen the white BMW sitting on her gravel as though it owned the place, nose in, parked close enough to the garage door that she would have had difficulty getting her own vehicle out. She had walked down the driveway in her coat, taken a photograph for her records, and then driven to the clinic on Harmon Street, where she had asked to speak with whoever was in charge of the front desk. That was when she first met Diane Calloway in person. Diane was a tall woman, mid-40s, with highlighted blonde hair worn in a style that suggested she spent real money on it, and the particular kind of social confidence that comes from having been attractive in her youth and having never quite metabolized the loss of it. She was polished. She was pleasant in the way that people are pleasant when they have decided in advance that whatever you're about to say is not going to be a significant problem for them. "Oh, was that your driveway?" Diane had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so sorry. I honestly wasn't sure where the property line was. It won't happen again." "The signs are fairly clear," Margot said. "Of course. My mistake entirely. Have a wonderful day." Margot had driven home with the feeling that settled in the chest when you have been handled rather than heard. She told herself to give it time. Maybe it genuinely wouldn't happen again. It happened again in March, this time on a Saturday, which was particularly galling because the clinic wasn't even open on Saturdays, meaning Diane had not come from work, but had come from somewhere else entirely and had chosen, out of all the available parking in the surrounding 3 blocks, to pull onto Margot's gravel because it was convenient and because, apparently, she had concluded that the consequences of doing so were limited to a handwritten note on cream paper. This time, Margot did not leave a note. She took photographs, several, from multiple angles, including one that captured both license plates and the no parking sign in the same frame. and she called the non-emergency line for the Crestwood Hollow Township Police Department. An officer came, looked at the signs, confirmed that yes, the signage was sufficient to constitute proper notice, and issued a parking citation. The fine was $60. Margot had also, that same week, called a company called Tether and Lock out of Bridgemont, which specialized in private property parking enforcement. She had a long conversation with a man named Phil Decker, who explained her options in patient and systematic detail. She had listened carefully, she had taken notes, she had signed a service contract. The wheel clamp device, a heavy-duty aluminum boot in safety orange, had been installed in her garage. Phil had walked her through the application process twice. The system was simple. The boot locked onto the front left wheel and could not be removed without a hydraulic key that only Tether and Lock possessed. The removal fee, which would be charged to the vehicle owner, was $340, plus a $20 administrative processing charge, plus the cost of any after-hours service call if the owner wanted the vehicle released outside of business hours, which added another $150. Margot had also installed a new gate, not a dramatic gate, not a statement gate, but a functional one, a motorized aluminum swing gate that closed across the mouth of the driveway and was operated by a keypad and a remote. The gate had a sensor that logged every time it opened. She had the code. Her neighbor Hector Blaine had the code for emergencies. No one else did. The gate had been installed in late March. Margot had also had a third sign made, this one slightly larger than the other two, which she mounted on a post directly beside the gate at eye level for anyone sitting in a vehicle. It read, "Private driveway. Gate equipped with surveillance. Unauthorized vehicles subject to wheel immobilization. Release fee $340 plus. No exceptions." She had done everything right. She had documented everything, warned everyone, and built a system. What she had not fully anticipated was that Diane Calloway would look at all of that and see not a deterrent, but a challenge. It was a Thursday in the middle of May when it happened again. Margot knew it was May because her late-blooming lilacs were finally open along the east fence, filling the yard with their heavy, sweet smell, and she had been planning to cut a few stems for the kitchen table. It was 8:30 in the morning. She was in her office, on a call with a client in Ashford about a commercial landscaping proposal, when she heard the unmistakable sound of tires on limestone gravel. She assumed it was a delivery. She finished her sentence, put her client on a brief hold, and looked at the security camera feed on her second monitor. The glacier white BMW 5 Series was parked on her gravel driveway, inside the gate. Margot stared at the screen for 3 full seconds. The gate was standing open. She looked at the log. The gate sensor showed it had been triggered manually from outside. Someone had reached through the bars and pressed the interior release lever, which she had not thought to disable because she had not imagined anyone would bother. She told her client she would call back within the hour, and she ended the call. She sat very still for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and called Phil Decker at Tether and Lock. "She's back," Margot said. "The BMW?" "Inside the gate this time." There was a pause. She reached through and tripped the lever. "That's what the log shows." "That's trespassing," Phil said. "Not just unauthorized parking. That's a different category." "I know," Margot said. "Can you be here within the hour?" "I can be there in 40 minutes, Phil said. "I'll bring the boot and a copy of our signage affidavit for your records. You'll want to file a police report for the gate tampering." "I'm going to call them now," Margot said. She hung up. She dialed the non-emergency line. She spoke to a dispatcher named Therese, who was calm and efficient, and who told her an officer would be there within the hour. Then Margot put on her shoes, walked down the driveway, and looked at the BMW. It was a beautiful car. She would give Diane that. It was clean and expensive and parked with a kind of casual arrogance, slightly crooked, nose pointing toward the garage as though the driver had been thinking about something else entirely when she'd pulled in. The driver's side window was down 2 inches. There was a travel coffee mug in the cup holder and a lanyard with a clinic ID badge dangling from the rearview mirror. Diane's photograph on the badge was small but recognizable. Margot looked at the car for a long moment. She thought about Gerald and his 2 weekends in August heat. She thought about the cream notepaper note that had been ignored. She thought about Diane Calloway's smile that didn't reach her eyes and the phrase, "my mistake entirely," delivered with the complete confidence of a person who did not believe she made mistakes. Then she went back inside, made herself a cup of tea, and waited. Phil Decker arrived in 38 minutes, in a white van with the Tether and Lock logo on the side, and he was professional and unhurried in the way of a man who had done this particular job many times and felt entirely comfortable doing it. He was stocky, somewhere in his early 60s, with a gray mustache and the kind of competent hands that inspired confidence. He applied the wheel boot to the BMW's front left wheel in under 4 minutes. It locked with a sound that was deeply satisfying, a heavy, definitive clunk of hardened steel engaging. The boot was safety orange and impossible to miss. He affixed the notice card to the windshield, tucking it under the wiper blade. The card explained the situation in plain language and provided Tether and Locke's phone number and the release fee schedule. "She'll need to call us, pay by card, and then we'll come out and remove it," Phil said. "No cash, no partial payments, no negotiation on the fee." "Good," Margot said. "You want me to wait until the police come?" "Please." The officer who arrived was young, mid-20s, with a careful manner and a notepad, and his name tag read, Officer Presley. He took a statement from Margot, examined the gate and the interior release lever, photographed the BMW and the boot and the signage, and confirmed that the act of reaching through the gate to trip the interior lever constituted unauthorized entry onto private property. "Do you want to pursue that?" he asked. "I want it documented," Margot said. "Whether I pursue it further will depend on what happens next." Officer Presley nodded. He was the kind of young man who listened carefully, and she appreciated that. After both Phil and the officer left, Margot went back to her office and called her client in Ashford back. She apologized for the interruption, explained there had been a property matter she'd needed to handle, and then spent the next 90 minutes talking about ornamental grasses and drainage solutions with her full and focused attention, because the matter, as far as she was concerned, was now entirely out of her hands. She did not know what Diane Calloway's day looked like. She did not know where Diane had gone after parking the BMW on the gravel driveway. To a coffee shop, perhaps, or to run errands, or to visit a friend in the neighborhood. She did not know how long Diane planned to be gone, or what Diane imagined would happen when she came back. What Margot knew was that the BMW was going nowhere, and that when Diane returned and found it, the conversation that followed was going to be a very different kind of conversation from the ones they had had before. She cut the lilac stems that afternoon, around 4 o'clock, while the light was still good. She arranged them in a blue ceramic vase on the kitchen table. The smell was extraordinary, dense and floral and slightly narcotic in the way of spring things. She sat at the table with a glass of water and her laptop and worked on the Ashford proposal until she heard footsteps on the gravel. Then she heard a sound she had not expected. Diane Calloway was laughing, not laughing in the way of someone who had discovered something funny. Laughing in the compressed, disbelieving way of someone who has arrived at a situation they find insulting. The laugh had an edge to it, hard and incredulous, and it was followed by the sound of the boot being kicked, once, hard, which produced only the dull report of expensive footwear connecting with hardened steel and the slightly pained silence that followed. Then Diane's voice, on the phone, sharp and rising. "There is some kind of orange clamp thing on my wheel. I need you to come right now and remove it. Right now. I don't know the address, some house on Fenwick Road. Yes, I'm serious. Why would I make this up?" Margot set down her water glass and went to the front door. She opened it and stepped onto the front porch. The evening air was mild. The lilacs along the fence were violet in the late light. Diane Calloway was standing beside her BMW in a camel-colored blazer and dark trousers, phone pressed to her ear, staring at the boot with an expression that moved between outrage and disbelief in rapid, cycling succession. She saw Margot on the porch. Their eyes met. Diane lowered the phone slightly. "You did this," she said. It was not a question. "The enforcement company did it," Margot said. "I called them. You had my car clamped." Still not a question. The disbelief was calcifying into something harder. "The signage clearly states that unauthorized vehicles are subject to wheel immobilization," Margot said. "You've been asked twice by note, once in person and once by police citation. This is the 4th time you've parked here. I was only gone for 2 hours. That's not relevant." Diane stared at her. Something crossed her face, the particular expression of a person who has, for a very long time, operated on the assumption that social friction is temporary and manageable and ultimately beneath them, and who is now encountering something that does not respond to that assumption. "How much is the release fee?" "You'll need to call the number on the notice card," Margot said. "They'll explain everything." "How much?" "I believe the base fee is $340. There may be additional charges depending on the time of release." The sound Diane made was not quite a word. It was something pressed through clenched teeth. She put the phone back to her ear. "I need to know the release fee," she said. There was a pause. Then, "That is absolutely fine. Fine. I'll call the number on the card." She hung up. She looked at the notice card. She looked at Margot. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Diane said. It was, Margot reflected, the most revealing sentence a person could say in a situation like this. It was the sentence of someone who had spent so long relying on social position and personal presence as a form of currency that they had mistaken those things for actual leverage. "I know exactly who you are," Margot said quietly. "You're the woman who parked on my driveway 4 times. I hope the rest of your evening is better than this part of it." She went back inside. She heard Diane on the phone for the next 20 minutes. The tone rose and fell. There were moments of sharp insistence and moments of something closer to pleading. Through the kitchen window, she could see Diane pacing beside the car, one hand gesturing at nothing in particular. The white BMW sitting exactly where it had been all day, going absolutely nowhere. Tether and lock did not negotiate. Phil had told her that from the beginning, and it turned out to be true in the way that things are true when they have been tested against many people like Diane Calloway before. The fee was the fee. The process was the process. The alternative was to leave the vehicle where it was overnight, which would trigger an additional storage and administration charge, and arrange for release the following morning at the standard rate, plus the after-hours surcharge that had by then already applied. At 7:42 in the evening, a tether and lock van pulled onto Fenwick Road. Phil Decker himself got out, which Margot had not expected. He spoke briefly with Diane, showed her the digital payment terminal, and waited with the patience of a man who had waited many times before. Diane paid. Phil removed the boot in under 3 minutes. Diane got into the BMW, reversed out of the driveway without looking toward the house, and drove away. Phil glanced up at the front porch before he left. Margot was standing there. He gave a small, pragmatic nod, not satisfied exactly, but affirming, the nod of a professional who had done his job correctly. Margot nodded back. She went inside and ate the dinner she had made, roasted chicken and the last of the winter squash. At the kitchen table, next to the lilacs, in the quiet of a house that was hers, on a property that had been protected, on a driveway that her husband had built, and that she had defended with patience and documentation and a very effective wheel clamp device. She thought it was over. She was wrong. 3 days later, on a Sunday morning, Margot's phone rang at 8:15. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local, and she answered it. "Is this Margot Veldthorpe?" A woman's voice, adult, measured, with an accent she couldn't immediately place. "It is," Margot said. "My name is Cecily Harmon. I'm Diane Calloway's sister. I'm calling because I think there's been a significant misunderstanding that's caused my sister a great deal of distress, and I was hoping we could speak about it directly." Margot sat down at the kitchen table. She looked at the lilacs. The blooms were already beginning to pass, the edges of the petals softening toward brown. "There's no misunderstanding," she said. "I'd be happy to explain the sequence of events if you'd like." "That's not necessary," Cecily said, and then explained the sequence of events as her sister had presented them, which was a version Margot found instructive in its omissions. In Diane's account, she had parked briefly on what she believed to be a public easement, having missed or misread the signage, and had returned to find her vehicle maliciously clamped by a neighbor who had a personal grudge against her. "No grudge," Margot said when Cecily finished. "I'd never met your sister before she began parking on my driveway. I left her a note the first time. I spoke to her in person the second time. She received a police citation the third time. The signage is clear and has been there for 2 months. This was the fourth incident, and the fourth time carried consequences. That's not malice. That's a system working as it was designed to work." There was a brief pause. "She says the gate was open. She opened it herself by reaching through the bars and tripping the interior release lever. The police documented that as unauthorized entry." Another pause, longer this time. Margot heard something shift in the quality of Cecily's silence. Not defeat exactly, but recalibration. The particular recalibration of a person who is called on behalf of someone else and is beginning to suspect they have been given an incomplete set of facts. "I see," Cecily said finally. "I'm sorry she was distressed," Margot said, and she meant it in the way that one can mean a thing that is also insufficient to change the outcome. "But the consequences were clearly posted and consistently applied. I hope your sister finds adequate parking near her workplace going forward. There is a municipal lot on Greenfield Avenue that I understand is quite reasonable." She said goodbye politely and hung up. She refilled her tea. She looked at the lilacs. The week after that was quiet, and the week after that, the clinic's parking lot renovation finished ahead of schedule, and the lot reopened, and Margot did not see the white BMW on her street again. She had expected to feel more, relief perhaps, or the particular satisfaction of a conflict that had reached its logical conclusion. Instead, what she felt was something quieter and more complicated. The specific, low-grade ache of a person who has spent significant time and energy defending something that should never have needed defending in the first place. The gravel was just gravel. The driveway was just a driveway. But it had been Gerald's last project, and she had protected it, and that was the thing that mattered, even if no one else would ever understand why.